Even after all the mayhem and terror Tigre had instigated, he had remained free to stand next to Mayor Newsom at a press conference, representing the city's community of innocent Latinos just looking for a safe place to encourage youths to participate in healthy and productive activities. A few days later, after their initial meeting in the park, Tigre called Diego and arranged to pick him up at 20th and Van Ness in the Mission District in a beat-up gray Toyota for a ride south to Santa Cruz. Tigre asked Diego to ride with him to meet some MS-13 members who were trying to stand up a new clique. The 90-minute drive from San Francisco to Santa Cruz seemed cathartic to Tigre. He hadn't bonded with a senior fellow gang member like Diego that he respected from outside the Bay Area in a long time. He was upbeat and excited, leaning his head out of the window as they drove south on Freeway 101, the wind blowing his hair back. Ever since VENMO got dropped, I have been trying to keep these youngsters in line, Tigre said, but I didn't ask for this position. He said he never wanted to become the clique leader, but was told by the big homies that was how things were going to be for the time being. Tigre's childhood friendship with Cameron, one of the gang's top 13 rafleros, capo, in El Salvador, was the reason he had been thrust into leadership of 20th Street, he said. It was obvious to Diego that Tigre was committed to the clique, but overwhelmed and confused about how to manage it in accordance with the established rules of La Mara. Discipline among younger members of 20th Street was increasingly lacking. They were frequently failing to show up for meetings and pay dues. When they did show up, many of them were higher drunk or both. None of this behavior was permitted in the better run cliques in Los Angeles and Central America, where failure to abide by gang regulations was met with far swifter and more severe punishment. Under effective clique leaders, the gang's ranks were kept in check through fear and brutal intimidation. If Tigre were honest with himself at this point, he would have recognized his best days as an MS-13 gangbanger were probably past. Old dogs like him with a steady job, a wife, and growing children tended to age out of the gang. This didn't mean quitting, which was never an acceptable option, but rather a tacit consent to ease out of daily participation in the gang's business. In MS-13 culture, it was possible for aged-out veterans to retain positions as respected elders who mainly looked out for the welfare of the younger homies that didn't have families nearby and required some supervision and protection. Driving to Santa Cruz, Diego and Tigre discussed the need for the formation of an advisory board of Congress comprised of 5 or 6 senior 20th Street members. Diego told Tigre that such a board, or a consejería, was typical of MS-13 cliques in many places, including the barrios of Central America. Diego agreed to serve on a new consejería for the 20th Street. After an hour and a half on the road, the two men arrived at a quiet block near an amusement park in Santa Cruz. Diego could see the top of the red and white Giant Dipper roller coaster in the distance and the beachfront miniature golf course called Neptune's Kingdom. They pulled over at a corner where 3 young Latino males lingered. The trio didn't look like gangsters. They simply looked like 3 laborers after a long day of landscaping rich folks' manicured lawns in the neighborhoods of Half Moon Bay. In a brief conversation, the 3 Santa Cruz homies sought permission from Tigre to establish an MS-13 clique in Santa Cruz to be known as the Beach Flats Locotes Salvatruchos. Tigre told them he was amenable to the plan, but he had also had to consult with senior gang leaders down below. "How many you have?" Tigre asked an MS-13 member named Spider who was proclaiming to be a leader. 15 right now, but we have many prospects that we are working on. We expect we can have 30 in a few months, Spider replied. "Okay," Tigre said, "keep working on the numbers and I'll reach out to the elders this week. I don't anticipate any pushback, but you'll have to pay allegiance to 20th Street if you want support." The gang members shook hands goodbye and Tigre shouted, "Trucha, homies," as he started for the car for the trek back to the city. By bringing Diego along for the ride to meet with the crew in Santa Cruz, Tigre was demonstrating to Little Loco that he was currently the top MS-13 boss in all Northern California. No gang members in the region could stand up to a new clique without his approval, although he would only grant it after consulting with the big homies. Tigre's display of authority indicated he was connected with the very top echelon of MS-13. Making Little Loco privy to these key organizational connections meant Tigre was quickly accepting Diego as a trusted confidant. Diego was hanging on the street with some 20th Street homies in a little park when Spanky and his cousin pulled up next to him in a gray Toyota. "Yo, Loco," he said, "we headed to Richmond to check out the PLS homies. You want to ride with us, dog?" "Sí, homie," Diego said with a shrug. "Let's go." The Pasadena Local Sureños, or PLS, clique in Richmond had been sent to the Bay Area by senior MS-13 leaders in Los Angeles and El Salvador, in part to keep an eye on 20th Street following Memo's assassination. The PLS clique was meaner, more aggressive, and quicker to pick up a gun than the 20th Street homies, especially since 20th had come under Tigre's more moderate influence. Although they still remained officially in the Mission District-based clique, several malcontents from 20th Street were spending more time in Richmond with the PLS. Diego, Spanky, and his cousin drove from the Mission and across the Bay Bridge towards Richmond, listening to hip-hop on the radio and bantering about family members and girlfriends in the States and back home. Below the bridge on the sparkling bay, sailboats rode the steady ocean breeze blowing along the coastline of Oakland and Berkeley. Across the bridge, they headed north to Richmond, a city of 100,000 people. Richmond had a murder rate 10 times the national average. While most of the violence was being committed between black gangs, the Latino gang population in the city was gaining force. Diego, Spanky, and his cousin arrived at a small, well-kept house in a dilapidated neighborhood on 7th Street. It was surrounded by a white picket fence with a slipshod iron security gate across from the front walkway and a yard full of flowers. Spanky told Diego the place was rented by a woman named Gata, the PLS clique's mama. As many as 25 MS-13 gang members resided there, crammed together into the 1,100 square foot 2-bedroom home. They were greeted at the front door by a group of 6 members and 2 women. Diego was introduced to Gata and her younger sister, Diablita, a thin, quiet Salvadorian who looked to be in her mid-20s, dressed in tight jeans and a sheer top fitted snugly over her breasts. She emitted a cool air of danger and self-reliance. Gata's age appeared indeterminate, still young enough to attract lonely, horny young bacheros, far from home, but old enough to be their mother too. She smiled quickly and laughed heartily like a man, her large mouth opening cavernously to reveal a formidable set of strangely gleaming teeth. She wore a white tank top with her cleavage generously exposed, a pair of baby blue soccer shorts, and flip-flops showing off her blue polished toenails. Her coal black hair was tied in a horsetail that hung all the way down her back to her buttocks. The PLS homies gathered in the living room, sized up Diego, the unfamiliar marrero in the town from San Pedro Sula, as Gata returned to the kitchen and had a huge batch of papusas in progress, enough to feed a platoon. From the stove, she could still observe Diego in between flipping corn tortillas and stirring the ground pork and fried beans. Diablita sat sideways in a worn-out Barklinger, her legs dangling over one armrest, looking bored and disinterested, buffing her fingernails with a file. 4 more PLS homies arrived in time for dinner. Among them was Wilfredo Reyes, aka Flaco, a 24-year-old with a sloping forehead, short haircut, and thick lips that seemed permanently pursed to cover an exaggerated overbite. He had a slight dimple in his chin. Immediately, the new arrivals to the party began bragging about having just attacked some norteños a few blocks away with machetes. "We fucked those chapetes up good, man," Flaco said. "They're gonna start calling us macheteros around here," said another of the PLS homies, laughing. The PLS gangbangers described how they trapped their victims in a surprise attack and went at them with machetes, slashing and chopping as the unprepared norteños scattered. The group passed to join the weed around the room. "Listen, homies," Flaco said. He drew a deep breath of pot smoke into his lungs and held it for a moment, then blew out an acrid cloud. "I know where to get some Uzis if any homies want one," he said. This was a point of excitement for the gang members, who all agreed they could do some hardcore work with a compact automatic weapon like an Uzi. Gata announced the papusas were ready. The gang jumped up to fill their paper plates and dug in, relishing the familiar home cooking. Gata brought a plate for Diego and handed it to him, flashing her most winning smile, something between a maternal expression of love and a hooker's come on. Her servile gesture was a sign of respect for an obviously hardened marero. Gracias, Diego said. He nodded appreciation and went to work on the food with the plastic fork. Ah, muy bueno. Ah, muy bueno. She watched him closely as he ate, and the gang continued bragging about their feats in the turf battle. When they had all finished eating, and the plates were tossed into the garbage, Diego, Spanky, and his cousin, now joined by Flaco, got back into the car and drove back to the mission. Once back at Sutro Park, they met up with other gang members and walked together to the Cacun Taqueria on Mission Street. Inside the taqueria, seated with the homies around a picnic-style wooden bench, Diego learned they were about to place a call to a big homie named Santos, who was locked up in a Salvadorian prison. The purpose of the call was to get instructions concerning the removal of Tigre as leader of 20th Street. The group huddled around a cell phone set to speaker mode as the call went through. "Si," Santos answered. Even when he was in prison, Santos sounded in a hurry. Diego knew from experience this was probably because he wanted to conserve his phone battery, because chargers were hard to come by in Central American prisons. "We want to know what we should do about the problem with 20th Street, Flaco said. "I'm still checking with the others on how to deal with it," Santos said. "I'll contact you soon." That was it. Santos hung up. When Diego told Santini about the phone conversation with Santos, the agent realized he was dealing with a morphing target. The 20th Street gang was in a state of organizational flux. In essence, it was a large dynamic group rife with internal conflict, treachery, and deceit. If Santini was going to make any progress, his assessment of the hierarchy and his tactical approaches needed to remain flexible. His investigation needed to expand now, geographically and in terms of MS-13 cliques, to include the PLS in Richmond.